now to Sally Foster-Fulton, and Sally is head of Christian Aid Scotland and an ordained Church of Scotland minister. Sally has served as Associate Minister of Dunblane Cathedral, and she has also served as convener of the Church of Scotland's Church and Society Council. Since then, she has actively supported efforts for the Church of Scotland to divest from fossil fuels. Hello, Sally. Caroline, do you want to?
Sorry, I had muted myself.
That's very easy to do.
Oh, good evening, and I have really, it is so inspirational to hear from people. So thank you for what you said, and I'm going to try not to repeat what's already been said. David did a brilliant job talking about the myths and how we need to absolutely bust them wide open and challenge them, and it takes that consistent engagement and challenge. So please pay attention to those myths and how we can counter those and engage in respectful dialogue with folk who don't see things the way that we do. But I've been asked to give a bit of background about the rather torturous journey of the Church of Scotland through divestment, and also to talk a little bit about Christian aid and international development and the shift we have had to make in our approach and in our energy and in our strategy and priorities because of not climate change but global heating, and so wanted to kind of break it into the two parts. So going back to the background for the Church of Scotland on this issue, in 2016 the General Assembly voted after a debate to engage with to have 2 years of really in-depth research looking at disinvestment in fossil fuels, how our the oil companies that we invested in were or were not paying attention to the Paris Climate Agreement. And it came back to the floor of the General Assembly in 2018 with a recommendation to divest in fossil fuels and have a timeline. Unfortunately, 2 amendments came from the floor that year. One that said we should divest immediately, and one that said we should engage with fossil fuel companies, keep our place at the table and not divest. Unfortunately, by a vote of 300 to 135, there was a vote not to disinvest, but to continue to engage with fossil fuel companies. And again, we really need to hear what David said about be prepared, be ready, and be ready to engage with folks. Roll on to 2019, and again, an amendment came from the floor of the General Assembly to immediately disinvest in fossil fuels. It was very close. 303 people voted for engagement, 263 to immediately divest. But one of the things that was incredibly telling is 70 of the delegates from the General Assembly, including the former moderator of the General Assembly, Susan Brown, officially dissented from that decision. There were also some, I think, very unfortunate things that happened politically at that time, one being that the chair of the Investors Trust was allowed to speak and she had the last word, had about 5 minutes to speak, and no one else could come back and debate that backwards. So again, in 2019, very disappointing, but people have not given up. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to hang on to. And lots of amazing things have been happening with Eco Congregation Scotland, with Operation Noah, and working with Stop Climate Chaos Scotland to really push for not only disinvestment from the Church of Scotland, but for higher, stronger, very strong climate change targets in Scotland. Where things currently stand for the Church of Scotland, especially in light of COP26 coming to Glasgow next year, I want to go back to one of the things that David talked about, and that's the financial risk. And I want to read from the Church of Scotland Investor Trustees report for this year, because one of the things that has happened this year is taking financial advice In January, I'm going to read this. In January, we discussed the prospects for the oil and gas sector with our growth fund managers, Newton. Their view of the strategic outlook for the energy sector was of a change away from fossil fuels towards renewable energies and a shift away from oil and gas to within fossil fuels. They believed it would be difficult for the sector to transition profitably and quickly to new energy generation and distribution, although the pace of change is accelerating. As a result, we plan to reduce our exposure to the oil and gas sector and began to do so. However, in the meantime, the combined effect of rapidly falling economic activity and the collapse of OPEC's restraint on oil production caused a precipitate fall in the oil price from around $60 a barrel to $20, and oil shares suffered accordingly. This made the terms of a switch to other market sectors unattractive, so we've had to put that on hold. One of the biggest arguments had been for engagement had been, we can't let people down who are in the oil and gas industry. One of the things that we had talked about over and over again was that risk of stranded assets. So again, it's about being ahead of the curve and not losing our prophetic voice. In 2020, the final act of the former Church and Society Council was to unanimously approve a deliverance, urging the Investors Trust to disinvest immediately from fossil fuels and to employ the same screening process that the Church of Scotland uses for investments in alcohol, tobacco, arms, and online gambling. This was endorsed unanimously by the newly appointed Faith Impact Forum. Unfortunately, there is no General Assembly this year due to COVID. And so again, things are put a little bit on stall. So what can we do? There's a project currently with Eco Congregations, Christian Aid, and Operation Noah called Get Your Skates On, that really is pushing not only the Church of Scotland, but also Scotland to get its skates on in regards to climate injustice, get its skates on in regards to stronger climate targets, to get ready so that our prophetic voice can sing and when COP26 finally comes to Glasgow. So that's where things are in regards to the Church of Scotland. But I wanted to speak very briefly about my role with Christian Aid and what climate change, global heating has done to the work that we do. Christian Aid works in partnership with countries in the global south, and we always work with local groups. So we don't import our expertise. The expertise is there. We work in three ways: immediate humanitarian aid, sustainable development, and campaign and advocacy. We have always tried to put most of our energy into sustainable international development, making sure that we build bridges so that people can climb out of poverty. Climate change has shifted that because we have to put so much more of our energy into humanitarian aid because of the increasing disasters. I'll give you an example. When Cyclone Idai came into Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Malawi, I got a call from the head of the team in Malawi who said that 4 years of work had been washed away in 4 days. That is happening, that's a microcosm, and it's happening across the world as more and more and deeper things are happening because of climate change. We also have had to put so much more energy into campaign and advocacy. For Christian Aid and other international development charities, climate justice is the only issue that we are working on right now. It's what we're pushing for lobbying, it's what we're pushing with our churches, it's what we're pushing with our partners, because it is the critical issue perpetuating poverty in our world. So all I wanted to say at the end of this is keep working, keep pushing, keep talking, keep engaging, keep acting. Thank you.